Welcome back to PROtalks. I'm Nate Halubka with the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office. And then in this PROtalk, what we're going to talk about are the non-entitlement units funding timeline. So what we're going to discuss in this video are the 10 key dates that you need to keep in mind as you move forward. All right, so May the 28th of 2021 is a date to remember. That's the date that the state actually received its funds. All right, so there's not anything that you have to do with that, but it is good to know that that date is there because it sets some other time parameters that we'll discuss here in a little bit. So today is June the 4th, and it is the quote unquote kind of timeline deadline that we have set for non-entitlement units to get their information in. Now, there is a little bit of flexibility with that. So to date, we have almost 90% of all NEUs have turned in their information. So hats off to you for getting that in. If you haven't done that yet, I would still encourage you because we're going to discuss a little bit later what happens if you don't submit your information or you decline to receive your funds. All right, so this upcoming week, June the 7th, is whenever where the state is planning on starting to disperse these funds to municipalities. Now, because we are working with 525 municipalities across the state, we can't do that all at one time. We're going to approach this with a first in, first out approach, which means that if you were one of the earlier municipalities to send in your information, you will be one of the first municipalities to receive your funds. That also plays into and gives a little bit of time to those that are still waiting and trying to get their information in now. You'll certainly still get your funds. You just have to wait a little bit longer until we work through those that have already submitted earlier on. All right, so the next thing, June 30th. Now, the state has 30 days to expend the funds to the municipalities, and that timeline, so to speak, runs out June the 30th. Now, there are some provisions and some information that the Treasury tells us that if we haven't been able to give all the funds out within that first 30 days, that the state should ask for an extension. The state is planning on asking for this extension, which leads us to our next date, July the 30th. And this is one of the more important deadlines. All right, so this extension is the one whereby the state has to start to collect information that declares two things. One, which municipalities are declining their funds, and the second one, which ones have we really not been able to get a hold of. Now, I will say we've sent out multiple emails and we're starting to get on the phone with those that we haven't seen yet. So just to let you know, the federal government does declare what we have to do with those funds, and it is not just keep them. Depending on which category you're within, the funds will either flow back to the state for use, or if you decline, or if you're not responsive, those funds will flow back and will go to other non-entitlement units to disperse. We'll go through that and those dynamics later on. We're still kind of pretty early in the game, and we're hoping that all NEUs submit their information. All right, so that leads us up to number 6. All right, the state has to declare to the U.S. Treasury essentially who is in those categories. Who have we been able to get the money out to? Who has declined the funds? And who have we still not heard from? Now, this leads us to point number 7. These funds are the NEUs funds. They're the municipalities' funds, which you'll have to report to the federal government. This is important because there's also reporting obligations on the part of NEUs. And October the 31st is an important one because it is the first annual report that NEUs submit to the U.S. Treasury. Now, the U.S. Treasury is still going to give us some information about how to do that, but this is good to get on your calendar that you know that you're going to have to do that. Now, we discussed this earlier. What we're going to do whenever we start to release the funds, and as a reminder, you'll get half of the money up front. The second half will come no earlier than 1 year from that first disbursement date. So everybody will start to get their second round of funds. So long as they've gone through this pre-grant agreement process and the grant making process, you'll get your second round of funds sometime in early 2022, depending on what date you submitted your first information. Now, the 2 last dates are really important, but they're a little bit further down the road. This is really important because you have a lot of time to actually spend these funds. The first date that we're going to talk about is December 31st, 2024. You have until then to essentially use/encumber the funds, okay? So there's some capital allowances for you to be able to go in and start to build some things that take a little bit more time. And so long as you're encumbered by that 2024 date, you're in good shape. Because if you're encumbered by that date or obligated to spend them, you'll actually have until the end of 2026 to actually finish up your work. So these are some top 10 dates. And just to let you know, we're going to be giving 2 more information sessions here in very short succession. The next one that we're going to give out is talking about the grant agreement process that the federal government is walking us through. We'll do that early next week. And then shortly thereafter, we're going to talk about the 4 main categories that you can use these funds on. Until then, this is Nate Halubka with NC Pro, and thank you for joining us.